And our next speaker is Abby Hehemann, who is a product marketing manager at GetResponse. Hi, Abby. Abby will be talking about bringing teams and tools together to launch better product. And she will also be talking about why it's important to be transparent about your goals and achievements instead of working in silos. Abby, you can take it from here.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Julia. So let me get my screen shared here. All right. Cool. Can y'all see me okay?
Yes.
The screen? Great. All right, cool. Let's kick it off. So, hey, everyone. Again, I'm Abby. I'm really excited to be with you all this evening here. I'm actually at the UX Pin headquarters, which is really cool experience to be here where the action is happening. And I'm excited to talk more about how product marketing truly does play the role of matchmaker, so to speak, in your organization, and really, as a function of the role, bringing teams together and then utilizing tools to facilitate that. I've been with GetResponse for about 7 years now. We're an all-in-one online marketing platform, so specializing in email marketing and marketing automation and lead gen tools for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and also for mid-market. And with that brings many teams and bundled products within one solution that take indeed a great deal of committed and focused collaboration to keep us moving forward and delighting our existing customer base. And here's a happy collaborative team at GetResponse. This is our account management team, in fact, a perfect example of an external team outside of product, outside of marketing, but essential to maintaining a positive relationships with clients and helping us keep them longer, and answerable, this team in particular, on the front lines to understand why, how, and when a particular development is or isn't taking place. So we want to try and keep them, most of them smiling as we continue moving forward. And now this is just a visual of the transformation I hope we go through today. I also hope this high quality image and these amazing pixels take you back to 1992 or something and come away in about 20-25 minutes as an even more empowered and effective team member in an organization. So taking ourselves from, little Mario here into a totally power up Super Mario, thanks to the, fire flower power up that is this webinar. And I have to be honest, I had to Google Super Mario brother terms. This was actually in an intercom for onboarding ebook, but it was a really nice representation of a transformation that one can go through. But I did have to remind myself what was actually the deal with Super Mario there. But getting down to specifically as a little brief intro to product marketing, I thought this was a really enlightening quote that gets to the essence of product marketing and thinking of it as the glue that really should bring teams together. And as like I mentioned, an essential function of the role of product marketing in an organization. And product marketing as a formal, distinct role or team in organizations and companies still, to be honest, seems a few years behind. It's kind of really well-established cousins of marketing and of product development. And so I think it's worth to still take a beat here as we start to clarify when we can about the function of product marketing, that when and done right, product marketing is really representing the voice of your customers before, during, and after the launch. And you should really be working to clearly articulate and strategically position your product's value that resonates with your market. And of course, always driving product adoption and advocacy. And in an interview with a product marketing manager, for a recent State of Product Marketing report for 2019. They were asking product marketers, what are the most important skills for product marketers to master to seek success? And almost every single one of the many product marketers who answered, they answered that communication is the key to success, that you have to be able to influence people internally. And that comes from getting clear on their goals, other teams and people's goals, and being able to communicate what's in it for them. And so this is something that really is just getting really to the core of what we're doing in product marketing. And so I want to go first into the tools that I think really help facilitate the collaboration and communication, and then I'll get into the methods, so like some really practical tips I think that are helpful for bringing the teams together. And so these are some tools that I would recommend and that I use on a daily basis to do my work of a product marketing and collaboration and communication obsessed manager. And so I'll show some screenshots of how me and my team at GetResponse use these tools to facilitate this open stream of communication and how we keep it focused on collaboration. Then I'll get into those methods as well. And I'll be mentioning tools that, again, we use every day, but also I reference some tools or include some, logos or mentions here of tools that, maybe are different than what we use, but I've heard other organizations use and have success with that. And many of these tools I'm sure you're familiar with, none more so probably than Slack, obviously, since we're a Slack community here with product tribes. But I did want to show an example screen on how we've dedicated an entire channel to feedback and collaboration of our deliverables, of our assets that we're actually putting out there. This is for campaigns, for launches, for product documentation and messaging. And it's actually a requirement that team members post their proposals to this channel before confirming a final design, tagline, or development, and discuss with the team if this matches our messaging and branding and customer persona or targets. It's not easy to always do this. It's tempting to skip this step because it takes some time and you have to maybe sometimes circle back, but this is really always resulting in a better end product for us. And this is an interesting one, Slido. This is actually playing a role in a few different avenues for us, collaboration and feedback for sure, but also transparency in a sense. Our marketing director actually brought this tool into our tech stack, and I've been impressed with its effectiveness in allowing people to provide their honest opinions and feedback on potentially sensitive or tricky situations, and using it, as a place to either publicly or anonymously, which is, I think, very important aspect here, compile feedback or ideas. And people can upvote also anonymously, and it takes that kind of fear out of a public call out or a photo and a name attached to your opinion when you're trying to get honest feedback from your team. And you probably noticed in a couple of my screens, a lot of white space. I did have to kind of, block out any potentially super internal or sensitive information as well. But I did want to show you some day-to-day, like real life screens of how we're using these tools. Next, whenever we're in the topic of documentation and transparency, Confluence or others like it, for example, Notion is really a cool tool. Is the total, workhorse for me in particular for documentation and transparency in our organization. It's where we outline campaigns, product launch campaigns, and get all of our teams in one space. It's where all of the most vital information about a launch or campaign will live. And it's actually bringing, IT and product and marketing and design teams into one space where they're responsible for keeping statuses up to date, where we keep the content that's vital for outbound teams to have easy access. And I've often accused myself of being too Confluence page happy or documentation obsessed, but to be honest, I've not actually regretted a table or a page I've created in all these years. And I've heard the same from other teams that I work with, our front-end developers or other outbound marketing teams, that taking the time to document the project and the vital information that's not wasted time. And it goes a long way in helping your team feel empowered with the knowledge and details that they need to move their own projects and their own work forward. And next will be transparent road mapping. We're using Roadmonk for this, both for product and for marketing roadmaps. And public, at least public for your organization, not necessarily customer public roadmaps. So I know a lot of companies are going that route these days. But product roadmaps being public and accessible for external teams within your organization, customer support, marketing, and sales, just, to name a couple of stakeholders there. They're so important for those teams to be able to empower themselves and know what's coming up this quarter or this year in terms of development. But it's also important, we've seen, for marketing teams to produce their own roadmaps. And we've actually experimented with a few different views, from the traditional quarterly roadmap and kind of time-based view, and eventually found for us for marketing, the Kanban view has worked better. But going a step further from that is then creating an additional view that's like a shared roadmap view that actually links the marketing and product or IT projects and dependencies so that we can all see in terms of the entire organization what's going on, and for different departments at a really high level view. That really helps everyone feel a lot more connected to all of the activities that are going on. And welcome to my most whited out screen, but this is within Jira, so our actual, where we're getting the work done. We have actually started with our high level roadmap, what we're doing, where we're going. We've documented our plans and we've shared it with our teams. We've collaborated, we've discussed positioning and messaging, and I'll be talking more about these methods like, how to align everyone on positioning and messaging, but this is the tool that we use to get the work done, with Jira. And so if you're familiar with Jira or you're not, there's quite a lot of internal jargon and terminology related to that. For example, creating what we call epics for particular projects and keeping all of our related activities specific to a particular project, and then actually within an organized epic to be able to launch out campaigns. And that's also how executing, full all hands on deck product launches. And then this is, of course, documented and shared with your teams, pinned to applicable channels, and do what you can to publicize it. And of course, you'll never stop getting DMs for someone on your team asking where the link is, but do your due diligence to put it where you promised you would put it. And that really will help reduce at least some of those Slack requests you will inevitably get. And I also, of course, mentioned Trello here. It's, super helpful, widely used for project management activities. And now for analytics and reporting, you'll see the most logos here because it's completely dependent on many factors that I will discuss a little bit further. But with the product launched, and particularly before you launch it, it's important to actually set up a dashboard, a shared view where your shared teams can actually go and easily see the performance and adoption of your efforts. So, you've confirmed with your teams about what you'll be tracking and, what conversions are most important to monitor and what you want to work to optimize. And so you want to create a shared dashboard that's publicly available for your teams to see how it's performing, what's the strongest, what needs to be optimized. And this is applicable not just for marketing, like this view kind of skews that way, but for events in your app, if your PO is choosing to track in Kibana or Grafana, or of course in Google Analytics. But what you don't want is for your teams to have to dig deep in Google Analytics, for example, or give up and actually have no idea the impact of their efforts on your campaign and on your project. It's amazing to be the person who facilitates actually a shared view that everyone has access to, then it can actually feel the impact of their performance. And so again, I've listed quite a few tools here. So this is the big one to actually get aligned with your team on where exactly you're tracking and what you're tracking, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And of course, you're seeing how you're performing, but then of course you always want to do better. There's optimization and testing, and that's really important. To keep an eye on these metrics and performance, but then actually doing what you can to optimize your messaging or your in-app placement using heat maps, A/B tests, and then sharing the context of what you're testing and how the test is going with your project team makes it really clear. For example, this is not a secret. It's not hidden for only special VIP team members or teams. You have all created and initiated this campaign and this project as a team. So remain open about how it's performing and what you're trying to optimize. Someone on your team could have a great idea about a scenario to test or something they saw and would like to try. So definitely continue to be open even after your launch and when you're optimizing and testing things that you could be improving. And we're using BWO and Hotjar in particular for these particular endeavors. And so when talking about these tools, just a few tools that we could actually use to enhance our collaboration and all of these efforts, I want to go through some pretty high level practical tips that I have to bring your teams together effectively. And, the question is, I think we all already obviously probably knew this answer. That's why we're all here, because aren't we all on the same team? And that's indeed true. We are. We're all after successful products and happy customers. We would all answer yes to that whenever we were, quizzed by anyone, that these are our big picture goals. But we all know, if we're honest with ourselves and what our daily work actually looks like, who we're meeting with, who we talk with, who we collaborate with, it starts to look a little bit different. And we all have these really, good faith efforts to accomplish these, particular strategic shared goals. But we know that product managers and people in marketing often find themselves with very different priorities and goals on a day-to-day basis. And the TLDR of why we don't collaborate is that we get busy, that actually work gets in the way, which is, quite ironic that we're all working toward the same strategic goals, but work actually gets in the way of us achieving those strategic goals, which is kind of, bizarre, but quite true. There's, other particular, more specific roadblocks to our collaboration. putting out our own fires. We all have our to-do lists every day. We get urgent requests from our more senior managers that certainly will get priority over maybe a strategic brainstorming session that you had set for 2 hours of your day that will quickly be rescheduled for next week if your senior manager actually, comes at you with a fire, which we understand. And keep in mind as well that many companies, product managers, answer to different VPs or senior managers than people in marketing. And so these urgent requests are based on very different agendas within each department. And, another, kind of roadblock for us is that product management is also often working toward different set of success metrics, when you look at it in a micro level than, for example, people in marketing who are, looking more for kind of lead generation, specific landing page conversion, whereas, product management has their own really micro set of goals that they're really focused on, even though we both have these overall strategic shared goals. And companies that don't have this strong link between product management and product marketing or marketing itself, if there's not a specific product marketing function in your team, they do run the risk of losing market share to more strategically focused teams. And, the benefits of collaboration, I list them here. Everyone's favorite word to hate, silos. I think that goes over and over, that we're all trying to get rid of them, but yet they persist because it's obviously true they're not great. And we should do what we can to explode them by actually, promoting and advocating and facilitating true collaboration between teams. It does help to naturally destroy those silos by working together and communicating. It actually comes naturally when it's imperative to actually collaborate to do those day-to-day tasks. You have to make it imperative to do your checklist for today actually must involve collaboration with a team. Marketing and sales must know a product's unique selling proposition. This is a must-have. It must know its key differentiators, how an informed sales rep should actually pitch this to a prospect. This is a requirement. And strong collaboration between product management and product marketing does help ensure our product is uniquely positioned in the market, that buyers understand and get value out of what they're buying. Sales is enabled to sell better, to sell more effectively. And all of this leads to a competitive advantage over those in our industry or our competitive landscape, people who are operating in those silos, because all of us know how easy it is to do that. They're not able to enjoy that brand consistency and this customer focused development and messaging. It's a competitive advantage because it's not something that's easy to do. And so I'm going to go through 10 really specific practical tips for bringing these teams together. 10, I know, but I promise I can do it. So number one is to get product management and marketing working together as early as possible in the product planning process. So with this in mind, a product manager should hopefully bring a marketing team into the very early stages of your product planning, the conversations where you define strategic thinking, the why for building a product the way you will. But, with that said, in my opinion, if a product manager isn't bringing you in, you've got to do the work to remedy that, to promote this change in your organization and come armed with information about why it's so important. Hopefully you can, screenshot something. So don't just assume someone will bring you in and wait for that to happen. If you see it's not happening, do what you can to modify your internal workflows to get yourself in there. And this will help, your marketing team deliver better materials and messaging for your product. It'll make them feel more like a part of the team and less like just order takers at the end of a long development process. And definitely set regular meetups. There's no way around it. We have to get face-to-face, for sure. If your organization is already in an agile environment or with Scrum methodology, there's already a structure for product and IT to come together. But there do need to be specific regular meetups worked into the development structure to account for this necessary collaboration between a product marketing, sales, and support. And from a product marketer's perspective, it's my responsibility to advocate and facilitate these additional and very important face-to-face meetings, to be at the kickoffs, at the retros. You need to be the initiator. Regular meetups in the office as part of your workday and, a workflow standard are definitely like our bread and butter, so to speak, in how we roll out products. But it's also a really good idea to facilitate some special strategic meetups outside of the office, if possible, an entire day dedicated to brainstorming. This was our marketing team past November, actually having a dedicated day for brainstorming and, strategic thinking. And it was one of our most productive days of the year. Okay, number 3, agree upfront on strategic success metrics that everyone, all teams involved are working toward. And so again, we know that we do have our separate strategic or more micro success metrics, but you do want to hone in on and actually align on bringing your teams together and what exactly are those success metrics for you too. For example, for me in product marketing and product, it's often product adoption that we dictate together, customer retention rates, revenue targets, and upgrade ratios as a free trial to a paid user. And if you're taking on this role of facilitating and promoting collaboration in your organization, you want to be the advocate or the champion of updates or changes that actually help you reach your shared goals. So for example, if you're not working in explicit positioning discussion in your development process, you should be the advocate for changing that. So again, come with research, with evidence. For example, arguing that, positioning briefs really help you maintain brand consistency and, USPs are clearly communicated and help you increase your product adoption, which increases your product revenue or, company revenue. And when I mention positioning statements, I just want to make sure that I'm not meaning this. April Dunford's amazing book, Obviously Awesome, I think is the way, or the other way around. I'm probably tongue-tied about it. But it's, basically mentioning that positioning is not an ad lib, fill in the blank, check off the to-do list type of action whenever you're working to position your product. It's much more a strategic exercise to actually examine the strengths, what your strengths are, and finding a way to put those at the center of your positioning and to come up with a way that actually truly makes your, as April says, awesomeness obvious. So this is not an easy step, but it's definitely worth it and one I like to bring up when I can. This is also very much related to number 3 and 4, but differs slightly in execution, because it's one thing to define your strategic shared goals, but then you need to make sure to really get more micro with it and spell out exactly what's needed from and for each team or partner in this collaborative environment to be able to report back on their results. And then define how, detailing and implementing those changes will actually benefit all of those shared teams. You want to as well, maintain transparency and communication throughout this process. So I also, really recommend to put it out there. Let your organization, let those teams who you're looking to really collaborate with, know what you're up to, what your goals are, how you're trying to get there. This is a template that I really liked for some of my kind of high level first half of 2020 planning. What's my goal? How am I measuring it? How am I trying to get there? And then actually sharing this publicly with the organization so everyone can actually see, what I'm putting out there. And then make it easy to give this feedback, to respond to it. And also you should give feedback when it's put out there. You have to kind of be really proactive if you're expecting feedback. So this is that Slack screen I showed earlier, but it's a big example of how we go about it at GetResponse. It's an expected part of being a member of the team, to post your deliverables, to consider and to respond to feedback and give feedback for others, because it's not easy and sometimes it's not pretty, but it always does result in a better end product. And this is something that I find helps whenever you feel like you're drowning in opinions and on feedback and on channels and on all of this communication, because it can get to be too much. You kind of get overwhelmed in thinking about all of this really strategic thinking that you have to do. So where you can, it's nice to try and take the guesswork out, and some of those unknowns, if it's possible, to create a framework for launches, for channels that are used when and for what. This helps you keep some control and maintain standards where it's applicable and save some brain space for those big conversations. And so there's, of course, never a one size fits all. There's never a playbook, a template that fits your specific organization or, one specific launch or product, but try to find something that's close, adapted for, each launch, each organization, but it does help your brain to take away some of this really kind of high level, big discussions and conversations. And the last 2 methods are a bit more soft skills, let's say, but I really don't want to underemphasize their importance in this endeavor. I've mentioned it a few times just in part of other methods that we're going for, but certainly do not wait for others. Don't assume someone else is going to take care of setting a meeting, of following through with a deliverable that falls directly under, your line of responsibilities. If you see someone in the hall, in the kitchen, they're not responding to email or Slack, if of course you're actually in the office. Of course, I know with our remote workers, we don't always obviously have this this option to go over to their desk or to catch them as they make a coffee, but take advantage of the time you can, and don't just assume or wait for someone else to do something. If this is something you're really advocating for, you should actually be the one to be proactive. And I want to round out number 10 with the good old golden rule, about treating people well. And I could list and almost have here all of the synonyms or related words for being nice to people. But this will go a really long way in developing relationships with your team members, making it so that people actually enjoy working with you, are willing to participate in all of these discussions and collaborative projects. So I purposely put this at the end after all of our tools and methods, because this is one that I really don't think we should underemphasize. You should really, treat people well so they actually enjoy working with you. And so as we reach very close to 25 minutes, how do you know if this is working? If you've adopted some of these tools or methods? So try to kick off your next project with some of these methods or tools. And then at the end of that project, at the retrospective, at the end of the project, see if you can answer these questions. And if you're already running retros, probably you're already answering these questions, but see if you answer these questions any differently from your last retro after you implemented, a particular tool or a new method, whether it's one or two of them. Actually see if you can answer these questions differently than you did previously. And then of course, make sure that you point to, and make a point to note what you should start doing more, stop doing altogether, because it's not always something you will work for your team or to continue doing. And so I do hope you've got some ideas or scenarios in mind for your organization or teams to how to better collaborate with them and why it's so beneficial to do so. So thank you really so much for your time today. I hope you'll reach out anytime in case of questions. I'll be very happy to help. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Abby.
Thanks a lot.
That was great. We do have some questions right now. So when it comes to product marketing, communication, and getting the message out there in terms of the product itself, how do you stay on the same page when it comes to voice and tone at GetResponse? Do you have a content style guide? Yes or no? Or if not, do you abide by any rules when it comes to writing about the product?
Sure. So we do actually indeed have a kind of brand voice style guide, which certainly helps. That's yet another, piece of documentation, kind of brand wide that helps. But that's, it's pretty high level. And then this is where I really have to point to the product positioning statements that you actually sit down and write with the PO, hopefully, to actually understand the USP specifically. And that's a collaborative event. That's not something your PO writes on their own and just sends it to you by email and it's done. This is then kind of discussed further on Slack. This is a multi-brain process. And so the brand kind of voice positioning helps as a starting point. So we understand exactly, the exact terminology for things that we use. Then we go down a next level to our positioning statements, and then we distribute that amongst teams and then share all of our proposals for our different channels on our shared Slack channel to actually make sure that everyone is actually communicating it in the way that we've agreed to.
Okay, the next person is asking for advice. How would you recommend getting a buy-in from leadership that may not be the biggest advocates of marketing? Are there any specific metrics a team could illuminate that might get leadership support?
Sure. This is, I'm sure, a very common question, and one I know none of us are immune to necessarily. It would help to kind of know from which leadership perspective you're trying to win over. If this person is much more development focused, if they're super sales focused, and align actually your argument to their goals, to really kind of like that first quote I shared really is to kind of be able to communicate in their language how what you do actually brings them what they need. And that's a big part of product marketing, I feel like, is to really not to be a pushover, but to be really flexible in the way to communicate exactly the benefit that you can bring by being able to adapt yourself in your language and your statistics for how what you do actually gives what they need. And thankfully, the internet exists for us. And there are so many resources on product marketing now. It's exploded, I would say, in the last year. And so I've seen just almost uncountable amount of like recent ebooks and amazing guides for metrics and tying a product marketing or marketing to revenue, to sales. And so just figure out where this particular leadership kind of leans toward, and then, frame your messaging and argument toward that if you can.
Thank you. And third question, if you were to write a job posting for a product marketing role, what would you write in that job posting? The role, the responsibilities, needed
Sure.
qualifications, and main skills.
This is a very timely question, I have to say, for me. And it truly would depend. Because product marketing teams are actually structured in all kinds of different ways. Product marketing being so kind of touching so many teams, some are much more focused on sales enablement, some are strictly on kind of or more focused on competitive intelligence, some are specifically lining with product. And so of course you do need to know exactly where your product marketing team is actually structured and kind of how it leans in your organization. And then how it's structured, how many team members, if they're focusing on one product, on multiple products, on a bundle of products. So get all of that set. And then the first thing I have to really, I would be looking for is that you enjoy multitasking. I know everyone says that, but you have to enjoy doing many different things at one time. You have to enjoy talking to people, being open, being present, very communicative. You have to be a great writer. I think I do a lot of writing in my role as a product marketer. There's a lot of product positioning. There's a lot of product descriptions. And so I would definitely be going for that as well. Someone who's obsessed with product and likes to talk to customers. So someone with a role, maybe a background in customer success or customer support, that's a great, kind of entry point sometimes, I think, into product marketing, because you really get to know a product potentially, you have the capability and you know how to talk to customers, hopefully, and you enjoy both of those aspects, because that's really putting customers and products, of course, together. I saw something interesting recently, kind of referring to the teams of product and marketing as actually product success. I know we have customer success, which is kind of customer support, but actually you're all obsessed with product success, which was cool. So that's not a perfect answer for that, because that's a huge question, but I hope you're just customer success as obsessed and product obsessed.
We could go on and on.
Yeah, for sure.
In Slack later. So the next question is about frameworks. What are your thoughts on being flexible with the frameworks, adjusting them to your needs, or coming back and changing them later on? I find often people want to keep tweaking and making changes weeks and months later.
It depends. My instinct is that I'm all for it. I'm not a super into just kind of adhering to a framework because you say that you will. In particular, if it's not working, if it's not bringing you any incremental growth, any incremental value that you can determine, then indeed, if you just changed it, 2 weeks ago, but you're actually seeing that the results that were made after that last change are actually hurting you, or you're not seeing any positive results, then you actually should tweak it, because we all have such unique, even if a lot of us are in very, competitive landscapes, we're having to do everything we can to figure out how we're unique. And so if we found some particular niche in our market or in a channel that we need to adapt to, then that means we need to slightly change our framework. And that's why being flexible is so important. I think there's a lot of need for, maybe if your product's more technical, or maybe an IT team, you have to stick to really, really stringent frameworks that you do not really go away from. But the good news a lot of times for us in marketing and kind of in this communication space that's customer obsessed is we should be very flexible to make changes to how we do our work in a way that actually brings us the most, kind of incremental growth that we're looking for.
All right. Thank you, Abby. That would be it. You can join our Slack discussion later.
Sure.
Answer more questions, because there is more.
Cool.
Your presentation really got the audience going.
Cool.
Okay, we will be having a short break.